I came home early from a medical conference, excited to relax, only to find 99 relatives partying in my house. They planned a massive family reunion, slept in my bed, went through my stuff, and never even told me it was happening. Then my brother had the audacity to ask if I'd sell him my half of the house. That's when I realized they never saw me as family, just an obstacle. So I got quiet. And then I got even. Here's what I did. Sona Leora is my name. I'm 30 and I never imagined that returning home early would have such a profound impact on my life. All I wanted was the coziness of my own bed after 3 long days at a medical symposium in Chicago. Instead, I discovered a house full of strangers and dozens of automobiles crowding my street. 99 relatives I hardly knew were rejoicing behind the flag that read, "Family means forever." They weren't quite strangers either. I didn't miss the irony. Where are you watching from today before I go any further? If you've ever felt alienated in your own family, hit the like and subscribe buttons. You'll see why blood isn't always thicker than water after what happened next, I promise. I'll go back a little so you can see why it seemed so overwhelming to discover my house packed with family. I've spent the last 7 years researching medical treatments, particularly targeted cancer therapies that have the potential to completely change the way we treat severe lymphomas. This session in Chicago was a significant turning point for my team at the Boston Medical Research Institute, which has been pushing the envelope. I was presenting our initial results to some of the nation's leading oncologists. My passion was never understood by my family. You could begin a legitimate career instead of wasting time on all that schooling. According to my mother, Selma, medical research is somewhat less reliable than my brother Dorian's work as an insurance salesman. Don't get me wrong, there is value in every career. However, the rejection of my aspirations began even before I enrolled in college. Early on, it was evident that Dorian was the best child in our small suburban house outside of Boston. People would look at my report card and put it on the fridge when I brought home straight A's. Following Dorian's delivery of B's and C's, my parents had a celebratory supper. They would comment he worked so hard when my accomplishments were merely anticipated. All the way through high school, the trend persisted. Dorian's baseball games were attended by the whole family. I only went to my debate team's championships when there was nothing else going on. Before he died of heart failure 5 years ago, my father, James, was a little more encouraging. Sometimes Dad would give me encouraging messages or confide in me that he was proud, but never in front of Dorian or Mom. The house became a financial hardship for Mom when Dad passed away. Dorian then proposed that we buy it together. He and his spouse, Liney, would reside on the first level. Mom would move into the in-law apartment we constructed in the converted garage, and I would take the second floor that has been renovated. It appeared to be the ideal answer and perhaps, just possibly, an opportunity to finally close the emotional distance between us. I made my own down payment using funds from my research fellowship. Liney's parents gave Dorian the most of his share. On the suggestion of my lawyer Barbara, we became co-owners with explicit guidelines for shared areas and duties, which at the time seemed excessively formal for a family and were recorded in writing. For around 4 years, the arrangement functioned fairly well. While Dorian and Liney were local socialites and regularly hosted dinner parties that I was nominally welcome to attend but were always scheduled within my lab commitments, I traveled regularly for research conferences. Despite my repeated requests for a simple text beforehand, Mom settled into her apartment and frequently stopped by my place without warning. "Sona, I am your family." She would frequently rearrange my belongings to be more organized while I was at work, saying I shouldn't need an appointment to see my daughter. But I tried. Sunday dinners if time permitted. Holiday get-togethers where Dorian's stories dominated the talk and I smiled while my career accomplishments remained unrecognized. My findings was published in a prominent medical journal last Christmas. Nobody brought it up. However, when Dorian received a sales award, everyone rejoiced. I persisted in trying in spite of everything. 3 months ago, as soon as I found out about the Chicago workshop, I texted Dorian to let him know when I would be gone and to ask him to watch my space. His answer? "No issue. Enjoy your journey." That weekend, the house will be silent. When I stood in my doorway on Friday night, the text would play back to me like a mean joke. The workshop had been amazing. Excellent response was given to my talk, and several senior scholars suggested joint initiatives. One of the most renowned oncologists in the area, Dr. Winters, had personally asked me to talk about possible uses. In order to take an earlier flight home, I ended our meeting early and declined dinner. I couldn't wait to unwind before the weekend. I had even purchased tiny presents for everyone. chocolate chocolates for Liney, craft beer from a well-known local brewery for Dorian, and a Chicago snow globe for Mom's collection. I reasoned that perhaps, just perhaps, we could all join together to celebrate my accomplishment. How gullible I was. Because of all the parked cars, the Uber dropped me off a block from my house. At first, I thought a neighbor was throwing a party. However, realization struck as I rolled my suitcase closer. I was familiar with these cars. Naira's minivan with the dancing school sticker, Caius's vintage Mustang, and Cousin Leaf's motorcycle. I became confused and slowed down. Every window in my house was blazing and I could hear laughter and music coming from the sidewalk. I noticed a splash of color through the front bay window, a big banner that said, "Family means forever," hanging on the wall of my living room. As I put my key in the front door, my hands shook a little. Inside, the clamor was overwhelming. Children screamed as they rushed through the house, music played, and dozens of conversations overlapped. There were many coats and shoes in the hallway that I didn't recognize. My cousin Kayla, whom I hadn't seen in at least 3 years, was the first to notice me. Her wine glass was halfway to her lips when she froze in mid-sentence. "Hey, Sona. God, you've arrived." People around her paid heed to her voice. Awareness of my presence rippled across the halls like a wave. Discussions stalled. People turned. With my suitcase still in hand, I stood motionless, taking in the surroundings. There were relatives, Morels, Caius, cousins, and people I dimly remembered from childhood reunions but couldn't identify occupying every square inch of my house. I hadn't seen a few since the funeral for my father. From my kitchen, Janet, a cousin of my mother, was serving food. On my TV, kids I had never met were playing video games. My research books had been moved off the coffee table to create space for snack trays and photo albums. I could make out my mother in the dining room, nodding excitedly to a group of elderly relatives through the throng. As soon as our eyes locked, her laughter stopped. Her face briefly lit up with sheer surprise before she collected herself. Dorian came out with a tray of beverages from the kitchen. He almost threw it when he spotted me. His face turned scarlet when Liney materialized next to him and whispered something in his ear. It was a changed house. Curiously, the majority of the family images on the wall showed Dorian, my parents, or large family gatherings where I wasn't present. Someone's laptop ran a slideshow with pictures from a vacation I had never seen before. A poster of the Carter family tree with some branches highlighted in gold had been painstakingly made and affixed to foam board. "Hey, Sona." At last, my mother came over, her arms extended for a robotic embrace. "How are you spending your day at home? We assumed you would return tomorrow." Dozens of eyes were on us, I thought. "I caught an earlier flight," I said, my voice firm despite the earthquake inside of me because the workshop ended early. Dorian showed up next to her with a smile that stopped short of his eyes. "Sis, it's great to see you." Unexpected. We made the decision to organize a small family get-together. "A small party?" I pointed to the people crammed into each room. 100 people must be present. Liney smiled proudly and said, 99 actually. The Carter-Wilson family reunion has been months in the making. Everyone is present. Great Morel Vian had traveled from Florida as well. The word months kept repeating in my mind. Despite months of preparation, nobody somehow had the idea to bring it up to me. Squinting at me, an old woman who I knew to be my father's Morel came over. "Is this James's girl? My goodness, I hardly recognized you. Last time I saw you, you were in high school." I managed to say, "Hello, Anna Vian. It's been a long time." She went on, "Your brother has been such a wonderful host, giving us the grand tour of the house, showing us all the improvements you've made since your father passed. He said you're rarely home because of work." A muscle in my jaw twitched. Is that correct? More truth surfaced as I made my way through the mob. Aaron, a cousin, remarked that he had booked his flight 6 months prior. I had never consented to having anyone use my place, yet Caius Paul complimented me for it. Morel Soraya mentioned how much she had loved spending the last 3 days in my beautiful bedroom, my sleeping quarters. My bed had been occupied by someone. I excused myself and went upstairs to my apartment on the 2nd floor, where the door was unlocked. My personal space has been totally encroached upon within. My office floor was covered in air mattresses. In corners were stacks of suitcases. Unknown linens were rumpled on my bed. Personal belongings had been tucked away or moved. Children's artwork had been taped over my framed research credentials. I took deep breaths to keep myself composed as I stood in the middle of my violated area. I could hear the party going on below. the celebration to which I had not been invited, through the floor. In my own house. My phone rang. Madison texted. How was the flight? Have you arrived home safely? My best buddy was totally oblivious to the bizarre situation that was taking place all around me as I gazed at her message. Dorian was in my doorway before I could reply. Softly he whispered, "Hey," and shut the door. "Can we have a conversation?" Everything would alter with the next talk. As he moved his weight from one foot to the other at the doorway, Dorian's discomfort was evident. I waited while perched on the edge of my bed, which smelled of an unknown perfume. Putting a hand through his hair, he began. "Look, Sona, I can explain. We've been planning this reunion for a while, and we believed we—" I cut you off. "Who are we exactly?" "Me, Mom, and Liney," he acknowledged. A few of the Morels also assisted with coordination. I didn't say anything, so he had to fill the awkward silence. It began simply with discussions of bringing the local family together. It sort of snowballed after Morel Naira proposed inviting the folks from Florida. He sounded as though he had practiced his explanation in front of a mirror. "We reasoned that the timing was ideal with your workshop in Chicago." "For what exactly, Dorian?" "For taking advantage of my house without my consent? For relocating my possessions? For sleeping in my bed with strangers?" "They're not strangers," he clarified, adopting that recognizable condescending tone. "They're related. It's also our house, not just yours. Remember that I also co-own this place." I retorted. "My apartment is my private space. When we purchased the house, we made that agreement." With Liney hanging behind her, the door opened and my mother walked in without knocking. "What's happening up here?" Mom inquired, but it seemed from her defensive demeanor that she already knew. "Our downstairs guests are curious about the whereabouts of their hosts," I said calmly. "I just wanted to ask Dorian why nobody thought to let me know about this reunion taking place at my house." Mom dismissed it with a wave of her hand. "The decision was made at the last minute. We were aware that you were preoccupied with your job." "Last minute?" I lifted one eyebrow. "Flight reservations were made 6 months ago. Aaron, my cousin, informed me that he had been anticipating this since Christmas." Her features flashed with annoyance. "We didn't want to trouble you with the specifics, though. You're constantly engrossed in your research." I turned to my brother and said, "In addition," she said, "we assumed you were returning home tomorrow because Dorian instructed me to schedule my return flight for Saturday. You explicitly stated that there was nothing going on at the house this weekend." Dorian had the grace to appear uneasy. "I may have misread the dates. For a gathering you've been organizing for months?" I put up a challenge. With her arms folded, Liney took a step forward. "In any case, we didn't think you'd want to take part. You always take calls or type on your laptop during family get-togethers. So you purposefully scheduled it during my absence, and lied about the dates, instead of inviting me and letting me make the decision? Now the parts were coming together. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" "Obviously not," Dorian answered hastily. "We intended to tidy up everything before you returned. Even the folks that sleep in my bedroom? My bathroom being used by strangers? Looking through my belongings?" Mom interrupted. "They're old relatives who can't manage stairs. We needed to put them in a cozy place. I had to get some physical distance, so I got up." "Why was none of this disclosed to me? A message by email? A message? Anything?" The three of them looked at each other, confirming my suspicions. They had purposefully excluded me. At last, Mom remarked, "You're taking this too personally. It's not as though you attend family gatherings anyhow. You never stop working." Dorian went on to say, "And you've never seemed interested in the extended family. When was the last time you visited Cousin Jennifer's newborn, or gave Morel Soraya a call?" The level of hypocrisy was astounding. Perhaps as a result of the fact that I have never been involved in family communications, I was completely unaware of Jennifer's pregnancy. We were interrupted by a knock on the door. Matthew, a cousin, stuck his head in. "I apologize for disturbing you, but people are inquiring about the time of dinner," Liney said. "We'll be right down," with a radiant smile that disappeared as soon as he shut the door. As I approached my dresser, I discovered drawers half open and their contents rearranged. Who has been organizing my belongings? "No one is experiencing any difficulties," Mom asserted defensively. All we had to do was clear the way. Everything is good with you. Just like clockwork, there was a crash in my bathroom, followed by a child's soft oops. When I hurried in, I saw a small boy I had never seen before standing among broken glass. My grandmother's old perfume bottles, which had once been carefully placed on the shelf. With wide eyes, the child answered, "I was just looking." I looked back at Liney, Mom, and Dorian. "This is not acceptable," Mom groaned. "It's just stuff, Sona. What matters is the family." There was no humor about it, but I laughed. Relatives? That's what it is. When I went to my closet, I discovered that some of the bags belonging to others were inside. Dorian cleared his throat behind me. He started by saying, "Liney and I were thinking, since you're not here very often anyhow, that perhaps you would think about selling us your half of the house. We're considering growing a family so we could use the extra room." Finally, the actual agenda came to light. Liney's mother entered the doorway before I could reply. "Selma, we need your assistance to resolve a dispute regarding the maiden name of James's mother for the family tree." My mother called. "Coming." She gave me a stern look as she turned. "We ought to contact our visitors again. Later we can talk about this. Sona, try not to cause a scene. Everyone is interested in this reunion." When I took it out, I found financial paperwork from Dorian's desk. Documents demonstrating several attempts to refinance a mortgage, credit card statements with concerning balances, and a letter about loan applications that were rejected. I didn't realize I was solving a puzzle, but the pieces started to fit together. The intentional exclusion, the reconnection, and the unexpected interest in purchasing my portion of the house were all related. With a racing mind, I carefully put the folder back. The sound of laughter, music, and glass clinking came back from downstairs. I could see additional family members coming through my window with gifts and food. In my own house, a family event to which I had not been invited, I could either set up a scene that would simply serve to support whatever story they had made up about me, or I could react in a way they wouldn't anticipate. I went with the latter. I turned away from the window and looked about my disturbed area, the conflict still fresh in my thoughts. The air was heavy with the powdered, sweet smell of my grandmother's broken perfume bottles. On the floor of my bathroom, a family relic has been shattered to glass fragments. I took out a small weekend bag from my wardrobe and carefully packed the necessities, including my laptop, crucial documents, toiletries, and clothes for a few days. I took pictures of my workspace with my phone while I worked, including the condition of my bedroom, the air mattresses on my office floor, the rearranged furniture, and the broken bathroom fixtures. I carefully recorded everything, time and date stamped the photos. My inventory was interrupted by a gentle knock. My father's older sister, Morel, was there when I opened the door. She was one of the few family members I had maintained contact with throughout the years. She stood with a straight back and clear eyes, smiling sympathetically at 78. She whispered softly, "I thought I might find you up here. May I enter?" I moved out of the way to let her into the confusion of my occupied area. She cautiously settled on the edge of my bed and said, "I wanted you to know that I had no idea you weren't informed about this reunion. I explicitly inquired as to whether you were involved in the planning process when Selma and Dorian were sending out invitations. They told me that although you were too busy, you had granted your approval." I shook my head and kept packing. "I've never heard of it before." Morel let out a long sigh. "When I saw your face below, I had a suspicion. This would make your father furious." My throat constricted at the thought of my father. Morel, they had been dozing off in my bed, sorting through my belongings. I was asked by Dorian whether I would sell him my portion of the house. She raised her eyebrows. "Did he just now? Curious timing." "What are you saying?" I inquired. She lowered her voice after glancing at the door. "Last night in the kitchen, I heard Dorian and Liney conversing with their financial advisor. Old ears perform better than people realize, and I didn't mean to listen in. Sona, they have overextended themselves. Something concerning underperforming investment properties and debt from credit cards. That supported the information in the materials I had located. So the entire reunion," Morel added cautiously, "I can't say for sure it's connected. However, the fact that they are now throwing a huge family gathering and portraying themselves as the kind hosts and guardians of the Carter legacy does seem opportune. Just prior to requesting that you relinquish your claim to the property." As I closed my luggage, a plan began to solidify in my thoughts. "I need to take a break and clear my head. Could you please keep the fact that I've packed a bag to yourself?" After giving a nod, Morel took a tiny velvet pouch out of her pocket. I brought you this. Tomorrow's family gift exchange was supposed to be a surprise, but I believe you ought to get it right away. There was a fragile gold locket within. Upon opening it, I discovered a small picture of my father and me at my medical school graduation with his proud countenance. Morel clarified, the day after your graduation he mailed me this picture. Said that seeing you receive your diploma was the most proud day of his life. He was aware that you will do significant things. I blinked back the tears that threatened to spill. I'm grateful. Morel hesitated as she got up to go. Remember that your father valued you even when others in this family did not, regardless of what you choose to do. Don't allow them to downplay that. I completed my preparations and worked on my composure after she left. Downstairs, I could hear the celebration getting more intense. In the living room, karaoke had begun. I watched from my window as additional family members showed up with overnight bags and casserole dishes. I texted Madison this. Emergency in the family. Tonight, I need a companion. May I give you a call? She responded right away. Naturally. What's going on? Instead of texting an explanation, I took one last glance around my room, picked up my luggage, and headed downstairs, squeezing around groups of family members. While some nodded or gave me a hazy wave, most were too preoccupied with discussion to notice me. I discovered Liney, Dorian's wife, leading a group of Morels in the kitchen as they prepared supper, utilizing my specialty cookware, which I had explicitly requested no one to handle. With artificial brightness, she said, "There you are, Sona. We're just organizing dinner. Could you please go to the basement and get some more folding chairs?" I answered in a casual tone, "Actually, I have some urgent work emails to handle. I'm going out for a while." She was not very good at hiding her relief. "Oh, of course. Here, don't worry about anything. Everything is under control." I heard my cousin Roan questioning Dorian about neighborhood property values as I was making my way to the door. I paused at Dorian's response. He was stating, "Excellent investment opportunity. We'll have the entire house once the paperwork is completed, and we can finally renovate the second floor the way we've always wanted." The assurance in his voice indicated that he thought my consent to sell was inevitable. Unnoticed, I slipped out the front door and made my way to my car, the sounds of my family's celebration fading behind me. I called Madison as I was leaving, and he listened in stunned silence while I told him everything. She insisted that you stay with us tonight. The guest room is ready, and Daniel is preparing his renowned lasagna. I politely declined. A hotel room downtown was already reserved by me. I needed time away from emotions to plan, to think, to decide what to do next. In sharp contrast to the turmoil I had left behind, the hotel lobby was peaceful. The receptionist at the front desk grinned courteously. "Is it a vacation for business or pleasure?" "Neither," I replied truthfully. "Just establishing the necessary space." I laid out the pictures I had taken in my room and looked over them while mentally capturing the financial records I had seen. I started creating lists, looking at my legal possibilities, and writing emails. My calculated retreat had turned into a counterattack by midnight. Numerous missed texts and calls, largely from Dorian, had piled up on my phone, wanting more and more information about where I was. I merely replied to Morel to let her know I was okay and to thank her once more for the necklace. I scribbled one last remark in my planning document before I was finally overcome by sleep. Family is permanent, but there are also repercussions. I woke up to yet another flurry of notifications as morning light crept through the blinds. There were 27 missed calls. Dorian and my mother most of all. Their texts had changed from informal questions to more desperate requests for an answer. "Dorian, last night, where did you go?" "Mom is concerned." "Mom, Sona, you are acting like a child. Give me a call now." "Dorian, you mean it, sis? Everyone wants to know how you're doing. Tell us that you're all right, at least." "Liney, Dorian is being humiliated in front of the family by you." I put my phone down and ordered room service, a luxury I didn't often enjoy but that day called for. I was sipping my coffee when I called my lawyer, Barbara Reynolds, because Dorian and I had bought the house. "Sona," she said kindly. "This is earlier than when we typically check in. Is everything all right?" "Not exactly," I said, and started to describe what had happened the night before. Barbara listened undisrupted, occasionally seeking explanation. After I was done, she summarized. "In summary, you co-own a property where your family threw a big party without telling you, let dozens of people into your private residence, caused damage to your property, and then demanded that you sell your portion. All the while, you found documents that indicate they're having financial difficulties. Isn't that roughly correct? That's the case, I affirmed. Would you be able to visit my office at 11 o'clock? Bring the original co-ownership agreements, pictures, and any supporting papers. We'll talk about your choices. I brought my laptop and files to Barbara's downtown office at exactly 11 o'clock. Barbara was waiting in a conference room with the property law expert she had invited, and her aide escorted me there. We went over everything again over the following 2 hours. There were explicit provisions in the co-ownership agreement Dorian and I had signed, such as mutual consent for any gatherings with more than 20 people and respect for private areas. Barbara had insisted on certain provisions which are now necessary. You have multiple options for the future, Barbara clarified. We can force liquidation and divide the proceeds by requesting a partition by sale. Another option is to demand a buyout at full market value, plus damages for property damage and violation of privacy. How about my mom? I inquired. She is in the apartment of her in-laws. According to the property expert, the agreement specifies her right to reside there is contingent upon the consent of both owners. Her status would need to be renegotiated in the event that ownership changes. We had a plan by the early afternoon. We would act lawfully and consciously instead of impulsively. After the reunion, I would go back to the house, have any damage assessed by a professional, and then provide Dorian official written choices for settling our co-ownership. Barbara underlined that communicating exclusively in writing is now crucial. No verbal contracts. No sentimental conflicts that could be exploited later. I secured priceless documents and treasures like my grandmother's jewels by visiting my bank and opening my safe deposit box after leaving her office. I next had a meeting with my financial advisor to make sure my assets were adequately safeguarded and kept apart from any assets that Dorian and I might have in common. The cars were gone by the time I got back to the house late on Sunday night. It was eerily quiet. The front door lock was sticky, as if someone had taped it open for visitors. Another breach of security. I clenched my jaw. Inside, there were still signs of the event: misplaced furniture, stains on the carpet, empty bottles, and abandoned items scattered throughout the communal areas. I took pictures of every room as I went through them. The account of my private room upstairs was much more damning. Based on the different personal belongings left behind, it was evident that my bedroom had been utilized by at least 2 distinct groups. My workplace, which is now a playroom, has sticky fingerprints and crayon marks. Glass still gleamed between the tiles in the bathroom where someone had tried to wipe up the broken perfume bottles. My phone rang as I was taking pictures of the damage. One of Dr. Winter's emails. Sona, I have suggested you as our top choice for a research job at the International Medical Research Consortium in Switzerland, based on your outstanding presentation in Chicago. To continue working on targeted cancer treatments, you have a 3-year appointment. If you're interested, they would love to talk to you this week. My heart skipped a beat. It couldn't have come at a better time. Or more intricate. I heard the front door open as I sat there with this opportunity that would change my life. Sona, the voice of Dorian yelled. Your vehicle has arrived. Where have you been? I texted him instead of responding. I'm recording the harm done to my area. Please be considerate of my privacy. I will discuss the following steps with you in writing. My bedroom door was still securely secured when I heard Dorian stomping up the stairs. A little later he knocked. This is absurd, he murmured through the door. You can't just hide yourself up after going missing at a family reunion. People were concerned. I didn't answer. I carried on with my inventory. He knocked and begged intermittently for several minutes before giving up and going back downstairs. My mother sent me a string of texts shortly after, accusing me of destroying what had been a lovely family get-together and hurting her feelings with my childish behavior. After forwarding the messages to Barbara, I engaged a locksmith to install a security system that would notify me of any unwanted entrance and change the locks on my apartment door. Within an hour, the locksmith showed in, and by nightfall, my area was safe. I contacted multiple cleaning companies for estimates for expert cleanup that evening, set up a video interview with the Swiss research team, and sent a thorough email to Dorian detailing the recorded breaches of our co-ownership agreement. Perhaps the most satisfying part of my well-considered statement was the last one. I emailed all of the extended family members who had attended the reunion in a polite and professional manner. I hope they had a good time throughout their visit and apologize for not knowing ahead of time. I ended by providing an update regarding my possible abroad research opportunity and making it clear that any further visits would need prior notice. It was a purposeful, elegant refutation of whatever version Dorian and my mom had been promoting. Responses started coming in by daybreak. A number of family members expressed regret, saying they were unaware that I wasn't involved in organizing the reunion. In horror, Morel Naira even called. "It's unbelievable," she murmured. "Dorian and your mother informed everyone that you understood everything and had consented to it. They claimed that although you had granted them permission to utilize the entire property, you were too preoccupied with work to assist with the organization." Her revelation, however upsetting, was proof of the willful deceit. I added her statement to my expanding file and thanked her for being honest. I eventually came out of my apartment the following day. Dorian waited in the kitchen, his face displaying a mix of anxiety and rage. He waved his phone and said, "We need to talk about this email you sent me." "Legal action? Violations that have been documented?" "Sona, this is not a commercial deal. This is family." Then I remained calm. From now on, I would rather converse in writing. I've stated my stance clearly. Isn't the house the subject of this? Instead of threatening legal action, you may have simply stated that you needed money. I paused at the irony. Respect is at issue here, Dorian. When you chose to invite 99 people in our house without my knowledge or consent, it was obviously lacking something. He blushed. Anyway, you're never here. Always working. Too busy to spend time with family. Does using the space while you're away make a difference? The difference is that it's also my home, I stated evenly. The deed has my name on it. Half was covered by my money. Additionally, my privacy was infringed. "You're going to punish everyone over a single miscommunication, then," he yelled. "Mom is inconsolable. Liney is crying. Do you want it that way?" As I prepared to go for my planned meeting with the Swiss research team, I gathered my car keys. I want my privacy and property to be respected. The email outlines everything else. For my lawyer. I advise you to carefully read it and speak with your own legal advisor. I heard him on the phone as soon as I left, his voice tense with fear as he probably contacted my mom. Now their predicament was extremely real. And I had already started working on my solution. The International Medical Research Consortium video interview was better than expected. I had allegedly received a wonderful recommendation from Dr. Winters. The Swiss team seemed sincere in their enthusiasm for my study methodology. Everything was provided by the job, relocation assistance, considerable finance, housing allowance, and opportunities for professional growth. The head of the program, Dr. Mueller, clarified, "We would need your commitment within 2 weeks. We need to have our team in place before our grant cycle starts next month." I told him, "I'm really interested, but I need to take care of some personal issues first. I don't see any barriers to acceptance." I sat silently in my car in the parking garage after the call, allowing it to sink in. Switzerland for 3 years. Keeping up my work with the industry's top thinkers. It was the culmination of all my efforts. It couldn't have come at a more fortunate time. Instead of driving home, I went to a peaceful cafe and made a plan for what to do next. The offer from Switzerland offered me time and leverage. I started by visiting a property management firm that specializes in upscale rentals. I met with Miss Collins, their director, and gave a general overview of my circumstances. I will be moving abroad, but I co-own a property. Although I would like to keep ownership, I would prefer my share to be professionally maintained and rented while I'm away. Miss Collins gave a composed and professional nod. We've dealt with similar circumstances in the past. Setting clear expectations and boundaries with the co-owner is crucial. She listed the services they offer, including screening potential tenants, taking care of upkeep, collecting rent, and generating regular statements. Above all, they would act as a barrier between Dorian and me, preventing emotional meddling. In order to document your unit in its current condition, we will need to inspect the property, she stated. Considering co-ownership, we will additionally delineate shared space protocols. Since I knew Dorian would be at work the next day, I planned the inspection for that time. Barbara was my next appointment. She had already drafted a thorough modification to our co-ownership contract. I would exercise my entitlement to rent my share while keeping ownership rather than selling my investment. This essentially prevents him from evicting you, Barbara clarified. Additionally, it gives you money from the property. The management firm serves as a qualified firewall. Everything is depersonalized by it. Before determining rental income, we also created a formal notice outlining the property damage and the itemized repair expenses that would be subtracted from the shared maintenance budget. Barbara had also prepared a contract pertaining to my mother's living situation. It maintained the security of her housing while outlining the terms and restrictions for her continuing habitation. It was sanitized. Just. Lawful. And that was only the start. Barbara suggested sending these by certified mail. It creates a record and shows that you are committed to upholding your rights. I systematically prepared for my possible move over the course of the following several days. I looked up the requirements for a Swiss visa, started the process of requesting a leave of absence from my current institution's Human Resources Department, and started classifying my possessions into 3 groups: take, storage, and sell. My mother and Dorian kept sending me messages throughout this period. Dorian wavered between being angry and seeming like he was making amends. "You're going overboard. We can discuss this. Is it really worth ruining our family for this?" "All right. Ignore me. My lawyer can speak with yours." "Sona, please." This worry has caused Mom's blood pressure to skyrocket. As expected, my mother's messages were deceptive. "I'm a better parent than this. The way you're treating your family would make your father very unhappy. I don't feel good. According to the doctor, stress is the cause. Do you want it that way? Your selfishness could cost Dorian and Liney everything." I stuck to my promise to only reply in writing and to only address important issues. No recognition was given to manipulating emotions. My response to my mother's declaration of a health crisis was straightforward. "Sorry to hear that you're not feeling well. Details regarding your existing insurance plan's medical alternatives have been forwarded to you. Please let me know how you're feeling." The property management inspection proceeded without incident. Miss Collins was thorough and efficient, noting many locations that needed repair due to the damage from the reunion and recording the present condition of my space. During the inspection, Dorian unexpectedly showed up at home. "Who is this?" As she took pictures of the water damage on my ceiling, he requested. "My name is Jennifer Collins and I work for Elite Property Management," she said coolly. "Dr. Carter has hired us to get her space ready for rental management." His expression changed from bewilderment to understanding to alarm. "Rental? Which rental? You cannot rent out your part of the house, Sona." Before I could reply, Miss Collins stated she can in fact. As long as appropriate management is in place, the co-ownership agreement expressly allows either owner to rent their share. To guarantee as little disturbance as possible, we will be managing every part of the tenancy. Dorian kept asking me progressively more urgent questions as he accompanied us through the remainder of the assessment. I gave him succinct, factual responses or sent him to Miss Collins. He withdrew to phone my mother when he realized I wouldn't be emotionally involved. Half an hour later, she showed up at the house. She came in without knocking as I was packing books in my office. She must have persuaded Dorian to use his emergency key in spite of the new lock. "This has advanced far enough," she remarked acerbically. "You're destroying this family for no reason at all." I didn't raise my eyes. With reference to the property I co-own, I'm exercising my legal rights. It has nothing to do with personal matters. "Is it nothing personal?" she repeated in shock. "Strangers are entering our house because of you. Your own brother is receiving legal notices from you. You are putting my roof in danger." I put the book down and turned to face her. If my property and privacy had been protected, the legal notices wouldn't have been required. "Regarding your living situation, the documents make it clear that, provided you adhere to the set rules, your housing is safe." "Delimitations," she sneered. "We are related. Formal agreements and legal documents shouldn't be necessary between us." "The reunion demonstrated why we do," I said calmly. "I have a call with Switzerland in 20 minutes if you don't mind." Her expression changed. "Switzerland? What are you discussing?" I gave myself permission to smile a little for the first time since learning of the reunion. The International Medical Research Consortium has extended an offer to me for a research position. Geneva for 3 years with an extension possible. It was like a physical blow to her. "You intend to relocate to Switzerland? Like that? How's your employment here? How about this house? How's your family doing?" The opportunity is supported by my current institution. Professional management will be provided for the house. And family, I paused, carefully selecting what to say. Family is and always will be. However, distance might occasionally offer the essential perspective. She cried as she walked away. I briefly felt guilty, but that feeling vanished 1 hour later when I got a text from Dorian. "Mom is so worried about you that she is unwell. I hope you're happy with who you are." The next day, the certified letters were delivered. In the evening, Dorian's lawyer sent me a brief email asking for a meeting to discuss alternatives to the proposed arrangement. Advancement. The Swiss post was formally offered 3 days later. I politely asked for 1 week to make up my mind, and I was given it. Barbara and I met with Dorian and his lawyer that week in her office, a neutral setting where professional etiquette could control emotional outbursts. Dorian's lawyer suggested a buyout, stating that due to the inconvenience of a rental and possible property devaluation, Dorian would buy my stake in the house for 15% less than market value. Barbara instantly retorted, Dorian may either purchase my stake for the full market value plus damages, or he would agree to the property management plan, which would set clear rules on who might use the common areas and who could rent them. We came to a standstill after 2 hours of heated negotiations. Dorian was just unable to pay me fair market value to buy me out. Finally, he realized that he had no control over the issue he had believed he could ignore or control. Even though Dorian obviously hated it, the management business arrangement was still his only practical choice. Are you serious about doing this? As we were getting ready to leave Barbara's office, he inquired. Move to Switzerland and make a point by renting out your apartments to strangers. I gently answered, this isn't about proving a point. It's about protecting my investment while advancing my career. The reunion merely made it clear that in order for me to do both, I need legal protections. I started the visa application process and formally accepted the job offer in Switzerland that evening. Over the next few days, I continued to accumulate missed calls and messages as I packed my apartment. I kept the emotional distance that now seemed essential for my well-being and only responded to practical issues. The day before I left, Morel came to visit and brought a modest parting gift, a travel journal with a handwritten note inside. You'll travel the world, your father always said. Honor him. Will you continue to communicate? As we sipped tea in my mostly empty apartment, she inquired. Obviously, I said. You are always welcome to come see me in Switzerland. She grinned and said, I might take you up on that. Seeing the Alps has always been a dream of mine. She stopped in the doorway on her way out. Eventually, Dorian and your mother will change their minds. People occasionally have to suffer the repercussions of their acts before they can accept them. I nodded in the hopes that she was correct, but I stopped basing my choices on that. Madison and her husband hosted me the night before my flight. The management company had already taken possession of my apartment. At that point, my phone had 47 missed calls primarily from my mother and Dorian, but also from other family members who had gone to the reunion and were now embroiled in the family drama. In a toast, Madison lifted her glass. To fresh starts in Switzerland. Her spouse went on to say, and to knowing when bridges aren't worth rebuilding. I felt a strange, bittersweet mixture of loss and release as I clinked my glass to theirs, finally defining family according to my own standards. Dorian sent me one last text later that evening. It's not over yet. Things will be different when you return home and regain consciousness. I didn't answer. But as a reminder of the reason I had to go, I kept the message. Retaliation was not the purpose of my power move. It was about taking back my value as a person. My phone showed an almost humorous notification 2 weeks after I moved into my Geneva apartment. 105 missed calls. As I went through the record, I noticed a trend. Dorian's number was the most common, followed by my mother's, with occasional attempts from other family members. The voicemails had a recurring pattern: annoyance, despair, and rage. At 3:47 a.m., the last one departed. Dorian was seen yelling into the receiver during Boston time. The property manager is showing prospective tenants your rooms today, Sona. I have no right to deny access, they argue. This is also my home. Call me back right away, or I promise I'll. The message ended there because the system was running out of time. I sent it to Barbara with a little message after saving it with the others. Just in case. Maintaining contact in spite of requests to cease. Tell me, please. An hour later, she responded. Typical intensification of emotions. The management firm is aware of this and is acting appropriately. Concentrate on your study. Here, we'll take care of things. And I concentrated. Every expectation was surpassed by the International Medical Research Consortium. Modern labs. Colleagues from other countries. Resources that, in contrast, made my former workplace seem archaic. A group of experts in targeted cancer treatments had been put together by Dr. Mueller. One of the main pillars of their integrated strategy was my research. My evenings were spent exploring and making new acquaintances while my days swiftly filled with worthwhile employment. The instant professional respect I got here was nearly overwhelming after years of struggling for recognition in my own country. During our first team meeting, Dr. Amani, a Kenyan biochemist, said, "Your approach to receptor modification is fascinating. Since your second article in the Journal of Experimental Oncology, I have kept up with your publications." The Chicago presentation hardly touched the surface. Our team's imaging specialist, Dr. Chun, remarked, "Sometime I would love to hear more about your methodology." This was what I had always desired. Peers who thought highly of my work, who viewed me as an asset rather than a liability, not a last-minute idea. I was aware of the irony that I had to go 3,700 kilometers in order to locate it. In the meantime, things in Boston kept changing. Every week, Barbara provided updates. First week. The property management has found a qualified tenant, a UCLA visiting professor with stellar references. Signed a 1-year lease. After being informed of the potential legal repercussions, Dorian gave up on his attempt to bar access. Week 2. Deposited is the first month's rent less any management or repair fees. An official complaint against strangers utilizing communal laundry facilities has been lodged by your mother. There is a timetable in place. Week 3. Dorian's new lawyer is attempting to nullify the management contract. Their argument is without merit. Be ready for further legal wrangling. The tone started to change, but the family messages persisted. Dorian's anger evolved into manipulation tinged with guilt. They found a strange tenant. Maintains strange hours. Mom feels uneasy in her own house. Dad would never have allowed this family to disintegrate in this way. Tell me at the very least how long you want to punish us. My mother's messages alternated between rage, martyrdom, and fleeting moments of contemplation. I've never felt so ashamed. Where have you gone? Everyone asks. This is why my doctor prescribed me anxiety medication. Why you couldn't just talk to us instead of fleeing is beyond me. Perhaps we ought to have informed you about the reunion. That final communication, the first hazy admission of guilt, arrived 6 weeks after I left. I spoke up. Indeed. You ought to have. It sparked a new dialogue that was at least based in reality, but one that was neither cordial nor conciliational. She replied, "We didn't think you'd care. You have consistently avoided family get-togethers." Most of them I never got invited to, I said. Additionally, my house was used without my permission. It's also Dorian's house. Not in my private apartment. We made a deal. It was several days before she sent her next message. I'm attempting to comprehend your viewpoint. There was no apology. However, it was something. The wall of denial that had characterized our relationship for years had a tiny breach in it. As my career in Switzerland developed, I made friends that seemed more sincere than the majority of my enduring familial relationships. Our study team honored one another's efforts unconditionally, celebrated victories, and helped one another through setbacks. We ate together, toured the city, and gradually bonded together as a community, one based on mutual choice rather than duty. I had a visit from Madison in my 3rd month. As we strolled around the shores of Lake Geneva, she remarked, "You seem lighter. As if you've let go of something substantial you've been carrying." "Perhaps expectations," I replied. The pressure to fit in somewhere I was never really wanted. Gazing to the mountains on the other side of the lake, she nodded thoughtfully. "You can demonstrate that you've moved past your hurt without having to revisit it." For the first time, I genuinely believed it when I said I know. Family should not be those who try to hide you. Rather, they should be the ones who see you clearly and yet love you. The pragmatic arrangement settled back in Boston. The renter was trustworthy. The management firm effectively addressed maintenance concerns. When it became evident that the legal structure was strong and unchangeable, Dorian finally gave up trying to undermine the agreement. After 6 months of traveling around Switzerland, I got an unexpected email from Dorian. "This is being written from Dad's former study. The management company allowed me to remedy a plumbing problem in the communal bathroom while the tenant was at a conference. It feels weird to be in this house without you. I keep thinking I'll hear you come down for coffee or typing away upstairs. I've had time to reflect about how things have always been between us, but I won't apologize by email for something that calls for a face-to-face discussion. As I sit here in this lonely house, I'm beginning to wonder whether we abandoned you first, long before Switzerland, despite Mom's constant claims that you abandoned the family. Liney is expecting a child. Last week we learned. I'm considering the type of father I want to be and the kind of family we want to start. I'm asking questions that I probably ought to have asked years ago, but I don't yet have the answers. In any case, this article featured your study. There's something promising about clinical studies. The article was cut out by Mom. She denies it when I bring it up, but I believe she has it on the refrigerator. Dorian. Uncertain of how to react or even how to feel, I read the email multiple times. It felt genuine, even though it wasn't the groveling apology I had imagined in my darkest hours. Sincere. Contemplative. I responded after a day of processing it. Best wishes on the baby. That's important information. Although early, the clinical trials show promise. Compared to conventional methods, we are witnessing tumor decrease in 78% of cases with negligible adverse effects. Although it's early, it might alter the way we treat some aggressive malignancies. Although I'm not prepared to act as though we're on good terms, thank you for your email. You always had a bigger dream for the house than I did. I now consider my workplace to be my home, and I'm surrounded by people who appreciate my contributions for the first time. Express your gratitude to Mom for keeping the article. Sona. After that, we spoke intermittently. It was polite but not warm. Sincere. Without attempting to romanticize or rewrite our shared past, we accepted it. Dorian emailed ultrasound images. I included links to my published studies. Every now and again, Mom would add a quick message to Dorian's emails, tentative first steps toward a different type of conversation. Barbara sent me a formal offer from Dorian as my one-year anniversary in Switzerland drew near. He wanted to pay full market value to buy out my portion of the house. He had obtained a new mortgage and funding from Liney's parents. Your choice, Barbara wrote. Although the management agreement is effective, if you would like a fresh start, this would provide it. I talked about the offer with my new friends over dinner that evening, which is something I would never have done before. Take a big life decision with people, not against them. How would you define selling? Asked Lucia, a Brazilian neurologist with whom she had become good friends. Cash stability, I said. And liberation from a system that continues to sap emotional vitality. But it feels like I'm completely removing myself from the family story, I said. Or perhaps it's realizing that your story continues elsewhere, said Mark, a Swiss scholar whose family had resided in Geneva for generations. And that is entirely true. I gave Dorian's proposition some serious thought before accepting it, albeit with some restrictions. A medical research scholarship in our father's honor would be established with a share of the revenues. For the rest of her life, my mother's living situation would be safeguarded by law. The paperwork was completed quietly. The money was moved. I was cut off from a physical building that had never felt like home, but something else was still there. A shaky family bond, restored on the basis of truth rather than obligation or guilt. I went back to Boston for a medical conference a year and a half after I left. I made plans to have supper with Dorian, Liney, and their baby Emily, who is 2 months old. We were joined by my mother, who appeared older but softer than I remembered. Although there were unpleasant moments in the conversation, carefully avoided subjects, brief silences, it was also genuine. I experienced an unanticipated wave of connection when Dorian handed me his baby, her small fingers encircling mine. She has Dad's eyes, I muttered. Mom's eyes gleamed as she nodded. She would have been loved by James. Dorian continued. And he would be so proud of your research. Your treatment could save thousands of lives, the paper claimed. I couldn't help but feel warm when he remarked, if the expanded trials confirm our initial results. My mother hesitated as we walked out of the restaurant. Before you go back to Switzerland, would you make another trip? Over the next 3 days I have meetings, I clarified. But maybe breakfast on Sunday before my flight. There was no mistaking the relief on her expression. That would be nice. We didn't say goodbye with hugs. We hadn't arrived yet. However, we briefly made silent eye contact and acknowledged one another. It was more significant than any coerced hug. As I returned to my hotel room, I reflected on how much I had changed since the day I entered and saw my house crowded with individuals who shared the belief that family means forever. The agony had changed, but it had not gone away. It had evolved into a sort of hard-won knowledge about self-worth, limits, and having the guts to define family for oneself. My phone rang. Lucia's message. How did the family meal go? Resurrection or survival? As I typed my reply, I grinned. A bit of each. Rebuilding certain bridges is impossible. Instead, we might be creating something new, something that is grounded in our current selves rather than the identities we have previously feigned. I woke up to an email message the following morning. Expanded clinical studies had been approved for the International Medical Research Consortium. The work that might never have been done if I hadn't had the guts to depart would soon help real patients, real lives. The banner had declared that family meant forever. That might be the case, but not in the sense my brother and mother intended. For better or worse, family, whether chosen or inherited, permanently molds us. Whether those ties turn into chains or strengthen us as we pursue our own paths is what makes a difference. I'll leave you with this as I get ready for my last day in Boston before my flight back to Switzerland. Have you ever had to reinterpret your definition of family? Have you ever found that the people who ought to love you the most can be the most difficult to set boundaries with? Leave a comment below with your opinions. Additionally, please remember to like, subscribe, and share this article if it spoke to you. Walking away from something that hurts us, especially when it is disguised as family, might often be the bravest thing we can do. And that's how I turned betrayal into boundaries, and pain into power. In the end, the best revenge wasn't yelling or fighting back. It was living well, choosing peace, and walking my own path without apology. If you're holding on to anger or hurt, I hope you remember. Healing is strength. Set your boundaries, protect your space, and invest in the life you deserve. Have you ever been betrayed by the people you trusted most? Drop your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Because sometimes the quietest revenge is becoming who they never thought you could be.